Hi, I'm Dean Bushmiller with Expanding Security, and we're talking about insider threat here. If this is your first vulnerability or threat video, please watch the free video overview. If you're not seeing the full version, go to expandingsecurity.com. You can get the quizzes, the badges, this mind map with all its dynamic links. So let's get started. When we look at insider threat, this breaks down into laws, tools, and techniques. This is actually two combined issues here. The law section was a little too small. The tools and techniques was a little too small, so I combined them together. When we look at this from a conceptual standpoint, if we talk about insider threat, the definition is those authorized users, those they come from inside of our organization, right? These are actors that are granted system permissions. They are allowed in. This isn't somebody from the outside. Now, when we look at the types of insiders, we break this down into non-malicious and malicious. The non-malicious insiders are those people that make mistakes. The people that we work with. That represents about 55% of the true insider threat that's out there. This is the lack of knowledge, bypassing security controls just to get their job done. Hey, please, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put my password on the bottom of my keyboard because it can be easier there. They may even leave confidential data unprotected on laptops, and we'll talk about all the deep details of all the things that can go wrong from there. Now, the other piece of this is about 20% of the people are outsmarted through some sort of manipulation or extortion like phishing or hog butchering. Now we get into the people that are evil. The malicious people are about 25%. This is your disgruntled employees. They feel entitled. They say, hey, I'm going to engage. Now, they don't call it espionage or sabotage. They say, oh, well, I was a salesperson, and so therefore I created all these contacts within this organization, so I should be able to take them with me when I go somewhere else. That entitlement that happens out there. So they could steal this information. Now, those malicious insiders could also be straight up being greedy internally, and they could exploit their excessive authorization to data. And this also could be like programmers introducing trapdoors into our organization. Now, Poneman did a great study on about 7,800 different incidents that were out there, and they looked at the different data types. Now, I know the math doesn't add up here for each one of these, but you can start at the top and work your way down from a ranking standpoint, and you can see that there are all sorts of different data types that were spilled out there. What was the impact of all of these spills? Well, the real average dollar cost per organization was about $17.4 million in 2025. Pre-incident costs were around $1 million. Post-incident costs were around $16 million. That's for incidents lasting longer than 90 days. To me, what that says is if you were to spend a lot of money on pre-incidents and setting up and preparing for this, it would cost you a lot less than when it actually happens. Now, often, this is much more harmful. These insider threats are much more harmful than the external attacks because we know that they're coming. There's a higher percentage of undetected crimes within organizations, which can lead to competitive imbalances that are out there. Okay, how do we fix this thing? Well, a lot of times people go, oh, firewalls. Well, no, firewalls don't work here. A detective set of controls would be like policy indoctrination, pre-employment checks, oversight of third-party service providers and vendors that we have out there, especially in software as a service, and then internal monitoring. For preventive, we want to look at policies, oh, wait a minute, all this paperwork again? Yeah, all that paperwork is really going to make it work really well here for insider threats. Awareness of backdoor attacks that may happen, and then for software design and maintenance processes that will lead to the removal of backdoors, which are perfectly acceptable while coding, but trapdoors after the fact, that's a no-no. Recovery controls are going to be things like incident response, account disablement, exit interviews, and contract reviews for those third parties for that supply chain kind of stuff. Now, intent cannot be quantified, but we have to look at this. Management's pessimistic view. Accountability, we go ahead and say, okay, who can we blame here? Who's at fault? Who's wrong here? They're bad. It's their fault, not our fault, right? Employees' pessimistic view. How about this? Lack of understanding. Oh, that converts to entitlement. I don't know how to go ahead and get my job done. And then I also feel guilty and I'm bad in some ways, shape, or form. That's not how we want to operate. How we want to operate. And the solution is to have a good understanding between the two and real communications. Now, for me, the real communications on the management side of things will be asking the question, how will these controls impact operations? Just because it's a good idea doesn't mean we should put it in place. Just because somebody comes along and says, hey, we're going to go ahead and do biometrics, 3 different ways, that doesn't mean that's a good idea. What you're doing there is you're mapping the controls effectiveness and the operational ease together. You're looking at those two things. On the employee side of things, how do I get the job done with the controls in place? Obviously, they thought this was a good idea, so I'm going to follow this process right here, and they're paying my paycheck. Now, here's the mapping here. They need to map that training to the protecting of the viability of long-term viability of the organization and ultimately their paycheck. So that's how we get it done. I hope you'll join me for the entire presentation.